Welcome to the Future AI, a podcast and magazine helping you understand AI the easy way. And I'm your host, Pranath Fernando. And today I'm really happy to have on Cecilia. Cecilia, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Paneth. It's so good to be here. So good to be talking to you from all the way across the world. For you're back in Brighton, right? And I'm over in San Francisco, but we have loads in common despite the distance. So yeah, it's great to meet you and see you again.
I'm really happy to do another international episode as well because the effects of what we'll be talking about today as well are international and they're not limited to one area and region. And it's really important for me that we share a range of perspectives to help people understand what's going on with this. So how about we start with yeah, maybe introducing yourself, so a bit about you and your background. So.
Yeah, of course. So hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Cecilia. I am an AI ethicist. I'm based in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. I actually grew up in Silicon Valley, kind of in the middle of the internet boom. I then went on to gain a degree in journalism. I've always loved writing and creating. And then I went to work in big tech companies, actually. So I worked in marketing at a big Fortune 500 tech company, held multiple roles across product marketing and go-to-market and brand marketing, and lived abroad in London and in Australia. And it was in that process of living abroad that I started to really witness the impacts of the technology that had been born and invented in my like little hometown of Cupertino, California, which is where Apple Computer is. And obviously there's so many amazing benefits of technology that we see every day, but I also was witnessing, high degrees of digital addiction, social media addiction, the negative impacts of bias that we're seeing in AI today. So I started kind of holding this level of responsibility almost, and that's what drove me into the field of responsible innovation, responsible tech, and now it's kind of this emerging field of AI ethics. And yeah, it's been amazing to see there's really starting to be more of a movement into what's, shaping it to be this field of responsible AI, responsible tech, because responsible AI is kind of the counterbalance to just innovating and pushing forward AI at all costs. And I think, AI is an incredible tool, but there also needs to be frameworks and ethical guidelines and ethics practices in place to ensure we're building technology that is truly beneficial for all. I'm also the founder of Remaining Human, which is a publication and community that's dedicated to exploring how humans might coexist in harmony with artificial intelligence through education, connection, and safe spaces for exploration of some of these really uncertain and complicated topics.
Thanks for that. And I think there's some really, really interesting things about your background and unique take on this. So the first thing that really strikes me is you actually come from the area where many of these, sort of innovations in AI are sort of being born. And I think what's interesting about that is like you probably have some idea of the culture around the kind of people that founded these companies in a way that people living in other parts of the world wouldn't. And also
Yeah.
that you've actually lived in other countries as well, which, to put it politely, many Americans always haven't. So you as well as having that insider perspective on the culture that gave rise to a lot of these companies, you've also seen other parts of the world and how they see the world and see things. And finally, I think just to add another unique take to all of this that you have is you're looking at the ethics of this. And again, that's not something always most emphasized with the technology. It's about, the latest version of this and that. And there's less conversations about what it means, what is a good use or not good use. And so I personally, I think these three elements really, really make your voice very unique. And to be honest, quite valuable to people because you have an insight about where this technology comes from, how other parts of the world see it, and maybe how we should be thinking about it in terms of what is good and not good rather than just rushing ahead. So,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's an area that I've always been passionate about, but didn't understand even what I was passionate about with, because I think when you grow up, as we all did, we grew up using these technologies without much consciousness or awareness around like, hey, is downloading Instagram beneficial for me? Like we just all downloaded it and started using it and posting on it until it grew into kind of what it is today, which obviously is a dual use technology. It has many benefits, but it also has many risks and harms that it's posed to society. And it's been, yeah, a journey of leaving, like a part of growing up in Silicon Valley was also this, again, just assumption that I would work in tech one day. And I did go work in tech. And it was some of the best experiences of my life. It afforded me the chance to live in other countries, but it also, yeah, maybe entrenched me in these ways in tech companies where, again, there's not a lot of emphasis on asking questions if what we're building is ethical, if how we are instilling safety into these products before we roll them out. I think in tech companies, there is, especially in Silicon Valley, this mentality of move fast and break things. We're seeing that like more awareness come to how toxic that is actually now. But, 10, 15 years ago, that was very much the mentality. It's like, how much can you build? How fast can you build it? How much can like get it to market? It's kind of this toxic culture of growth at all costs. And we still see that a lot today, but there's more of a counterbalance. There's more people asking questions of like, hey, just because we can build this, should we build this? And for me, on the ethics side, it really continuously comes back to values and understanding what we value as a society and as individuals. And we're all going to value different things. But it's important to know and understand what our values are and then mirror our use of technology in accordance to those values. Because in the past, again, there hasn't been a ton of awareness around like, like, do I value spending 3 hours a day scrolling social media, consuming content from brands? And, like, is that aligned with my values? Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it's just like bringing awareness to what those values are and trying to live more in accordance to those values.
and it's interesting. So one interesting thing I think about what you've said is maybe our values has not been so important for several recent technology ways. So, for example, when the internet came on and we essentially just had web pages, static web pages, the issue of values probably was less of an issue and maybe
Right.
started to become more of an issue with Web 2 and Facebook and that kind of thing. But it's clearly potentially much more of an issue with these, I suppose, if I could put it, like my last podcast guest, Eugene, who is a linguist, we were really speaking about one of the things that makes AI quite a distinctive technology. It's quite relational in terms of like,
Mhm.
we're relating to it. I mean, it's not human, but and that makes it very different to, using a hammer or even, just opening up a browser and opening up a web page. It's so I'd love to actually
Yeah.
put to you. So I'm really aware of people have very different feelings and views towards this technology. And I'd love to just put to you some of those perspectives to get your
Yeah.
take on how you might speak to some of those. I'm sure you're familiar with some of these as so I guess the first um, group of people, of which I know there's a large number, are people who are actually very afraid, very worried about this technology and frightened. Some of these people might not even want to know about it and just find all the hype a bit too much and want to switch off and or might see it as a potential threat. So for those people that are like, let's say, worried or concerned or anxious or even angry about this change, what would you say to them?
Yeah. Such a good question. And it's of such a valid concern and valid fear because we are operating in a landscape of so much uncertainty right now. And in that uncertainty, we also have these really loud voices telling us to use AI, to integrate AI into our workflows, to build AI products that, all the venture capital money is going into AI startups. There's all these narratives that are really overwhelming because when you're just trying to, grow a good career and, have a beautiful life, like have kids for your family, you're just not always wanting to like stay up to date with this latest technology. And I feel like there's this big pressure that we need to all be using AI. And, I think the problem with AI for me right now is the speed at which it's moving. AI is not a bad technology. It's not it's not fundamentally, there's something fundamentally immoral about it. It's how it's going to be used, right? So there's only one AI, and there's like the good applications of AI that are things like curing diseases and um, coming to new solutions to help aid climate change that are always mentioned. And then there's the negative applications and risks of AI, which are things like like easing access to developing biological weapons, lethal autonomous weapons becoming more prevalent. And I think it's important to really ground yourself in this time in understanding that we can and should try to realize the benefits of AI, but it's going to take collective action and awareness to try to negate some of those negative aspects of AI. And this comes through education, like through the work you're doing. This comes through really deeply understanding what the problems are and then voicing your concerns, voicing your fears, voicing what kind of world you'd like to see to your local governments, electing leaders who are more likely to put regulation in place. It's both awareness and action. And then if for me, a big focus is people who actually work in tech companies and AI companies. It's trying to raise awareness of the necessity of ethical frameworks. It's trying to get people to shift their thinking from just trying to ship out the next product to, okay, actually, what is the best way of doing it and what is the right speed? So for people who are kind of sitting at home listening to this and afraid of what AI is going to bring, I think it's also good to ground yourself in where we currently are with AI because there's so many talks, so much discussion around existential risk, which is a really important and valid part of the discussion right now. But there's also something to be said about grounding yourself in the exact problems we're facing right now with AI, which is, algorithmic bias, the potential of AI to spread misinformation in the lead up to elections, um, deep fakes that are targeting young girls in high school. And there's like legislation that can be passed to combat some of these things. And I think it's about raising your hand now, using your voice now to try to combat some of these negative aspects now so that we can live our way into a future that is more aligned again with our values, what we value in a life and in a world and in our society. That's more reflective of what we want to see and not what the corporations making money off of AI want us to live our way into.
No, thank you for that. And yeah, that's a lot of really good things for people to think about. I guess the other group I would like to, I suppose, put to you and get your thoughts are on people, let's say, on the other side of things who are,
Mhm.
quite positive about it. But of course, even that group, it can range quite considerably from, let's say, people you described as, the people that are just rushing hard, move fast and break things, going in the most extreme speed. Or, it could be sort of more nuanced way where people are just very keen to learn, let's say, practical skills. How can I use ChatGPT to help me? Which might seem more, I suppose, immediate.
Yeah.
And what I've certainly noticed, I suppose what I'm trying to do with my publication is provide, informed information. But even I have felt a bit, let's say, pressured because, to be totally honest, there's more demand and there's more Google searches for people who want to learn how to do things with
Hmm.
ChatGPT. and there's far less searches and demand for people that want to know what is a good way to use this technology.
Mm.
And I think both are useful and important, which is why I'm trying to provide both on in my publication. But what would you say to those who seem happy with AI, maybe even excited, just want to learn how to do the latest things to help them in their work, and wouldn't normally be very interested in thinking about these kind of ethical issues? And to be totally honest, there may well be many of my subscribers who are now maybe using my tutorials and courses, learning how to use these skills to do useful things, but who may not necessarily be interested in thinking what's a good way to use it or not. What would you say to, I suppose, all of these group of people? I was very, you could say that.
Yeah, yeah, I would say first of all, like it's great to learn how to use AI. I think it's a necessary skill. I think it's great that you, Pranath, are creating courses to help people upskill. Again, AI is an incredible technology. It's a magical tool for creativity, for reason, like for research, for creating code. It's an amazing tool, and I truly believe it can and will like augment what we are capable of as humans. And I think in a lot of ways we, are limited in what we are right now as a species, and AI can totally help us to reimagine what our society looks like, what we look like as individuals, our relationship to work, all of these things like AI makes possible. Um, so I want to emphasize that it's definitely not bad to learn how to use AI. I think it's amazing, it's quite good, but I think in that comes a responsibility because I always come back to the quote of with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that is, really applicable to the companies creating AI. The power that the like for frontier AI labs, frontier AI meaning the AI companies that are really pushing AI forward way ahead of the rest of startups. Um, they have great responsibility. And I think in that users also have great responsibility. We as users, I think it's time to recognize that we also have a responsibility to understand what we're using, to bring awareness to how that product has been built, trained, where the training data has come from, what resources have been used to build this product. AI, as I think more people are becoming aware of, uses vast natural resources in the form of energy and water consumption to be created. So, a quote I always, or a stat I always use is generating one image on DALL-E 3 is equivalent to charging your iPhone from 0 to 100%. And so I think it's like bringing awareness to these
Mm.
things of like, okay, my use of AI doesn't have, it's not like it doesn't have any consequences. My use of AI involves whether I'm using ChatGPT or another service, it's been trained on copyrighted materials. And, having an understanding of someone put a lot of work into the articles and the books and the artwork that these models have been trained on, and those people aren't being compensated, and they're not even being like their work has not even been attributed. So there's just these little things that we can start to, as a society, bring awareness to. And Gary Marcus, who's an incredible AI thinker and Substacker, I saw him speak a couple of weeks ago, and he had this really powerful idea for me, which was that, AI is not bad. Generative AI specifically, he was talking about, is not bad. We shouldn't like stop AI, but we should, as a collective, potentially think about boycotting generative AI for now until we can figure out how to do this right. Because if we just blast ahead without these frameworks in place, without thinking about how doing it responsibly, we're creating more problems as we are solving problems. And of course, there's arguments of we can't slow down because other countries won't slow down and we have to beat those countries. And there's merit to those arguments, but it's I think in our use of AI, don't stop using it, but bring awareness to like how you might be able to use it in a way that's, again, aligned to your values, not aligned to the values of the company you work at or the company who is selling you this product.
No, thanks for that. And I think it's really great that you used I suppose like specific examples that could help people understand how it relates to how they may use it. And I'd love to offer another example as well, because it might seem to some people, what's the harm? I'm just playing around with ChatGPT or Midjourney, whatever. Why is there an ethical issue there? So I'd love, and you offered a few, I suppose, interesting examples, and I'd like to offer another one to get your thoughts on. So, say for example, I literally have just completed a course for my publication on how to use Midjourney, which is really, really amazing tool. You know, you can make incredible images, but uh, I can see couple of potential like ethical issues immediately, and some people might be shocked to kind of hear how it just makes great images. So let's say, for example, one of the modules in my course was about creating like marketing or sort of product promotion copy and visuals. And so, for example, one potential issue is so if I say, create a person in a certain way to but I'm not, let's say I'm not specific too much and it's quite general. And then it comes out with a few images. But then what if, for example, those images just all happen to be someone from a specific, always the same gender, always the same race or something like that? I mean, it
Yeah.
might happen, it might not happen, but if it does happen, then as we know, for example, that is because one of the reasons is because these AI image creators are not perfectly balanced and equal, making things all equal in it. They have biases. So
Yeah.
that could be one of the reasons, ethical problems with, well, if we're always producing the same people looking the same way for certain industries or, professions, is that a problem? Or do we want to think about that? And then secondly,
Mhm.
our own biases. So let's say, for example, if we're creating a, copy for a, either a product or even a job advert, and we are specific about, let's say, the kind of people that we want in that, and maybe specific about certain gender or races, and maybe we are highlighting or even exclusively representing certain races, and we're excluding.
Yeah.
So is that what we want to be doing? So, for example, so I can see two examples where the innocent idea, oh, I'm just making some images with Midjourney. There's multiple levels of potential ethical issue I can see. I don't know what you want to say about that. I was curious to hear.
Yeah, you bring up an amazing point and an area of responsible AI that I'm super passionate about, and that there's a lot of amazing people working on, including at the AI companies. They're very aware that bias is a huge issue. And I want to speak a little bit to how bias actually happens in AI systems because I think it's important for the kind of that context. Because at the end of the day, you and I, the end users, we see this image and we want to understand, okay, why is the AI creating that? And again, it's like important to remember that AI is a mirror of us as a society. And this happens because the models are trained on vast amounts of data that likely are going to be underrepresenting certain groups or reflect certain biases. So a good example of this is the case of Amazon creating an internal tool to screen resumes. And they trained this tool using historical data of resumes that they had screened in the past and also, accepted. Um, the problem was that those were for engineer roles and that many of the engineers that Amazon had hired in the past were men. And so the tool was biased towards choosing men. It picked up on women's resumes through things like women saying, like, oh, I was the chair of the women's network at my organization. And it then was accidentally like screening out women, or at least, accidentally from the perspective of hiring managers, not intentionally trying to bias against women. But when you're outsourcing your decision making power to an algorithm that is trained on biased data, we run that risk. And the common counter argument to this is like, well, humans also are biased. We also carry unconscious bias, which is true. But it begs the question of like, how do we ensure that um, I don't know, humans still are in control of the bias. Like we don't want to just be dependent because it carries really real risks for the organization too. Like if your organization is using an AI model that is biased and then someone recognizes like, hey, I was rejected. Why was I rejected? They could open a, discriminatory lawsuit against you. Like these have real world consequences. And it's important to recognize and be aware of them. And again, it's not like AI companies aren't working on this. Google recently, like a pretty famous example at this point, is like their model swung too far in the other direction. And if you typed in, show me a German soldier from the 1940s, it spat back pictures of Nazis who were in non-white races, which is obviously factually incorrect. And then we're revising history with these models. And the solution here is getting better at like being more exact with the training data during training. During training, the algorithms will make choices and then optimize based on those choices. But for me, this is, keeping a human in the loop during training, making sure that when an AI system is put to use, how its outputs are interpreted and applied, can also introduce further bias. So um, yeah, it's a big problem, and I think it's also important to recognize that no human is value neutral. We're not going to get an AI that is like completely neutral in every single way. But we as a society, again, bringing it back to values, need to ask ourselves what we value and how can those values be reflected in the AI. And like one last thing I'll add is, we 100 years ago had very different values from what we value today. We had a very different idea of what fairness was 100 years ago, right? Women were not as prevalent as they are in the workforce. That was change we had to work ourselves into. And so making AI adaptive as our society adapts and changes, I think is also incredibly important.
No, that's yeah, really fantastic. No, thank you. And I suppose the way I would put it myself is I think there's a difference between conscious usage of these tools and unconscious usage of these tools. And I think even though the challenges that we've laid out are not solved and are very difficult to solve, one thing we can do and is in our power is to develop more awareness of what we are doing, how we are using these tools. That is within our control. So hopefully we can
Exactly.
encourage people to improve their awareness while they're using these powerful tools and
Yeah.
so I'd love to
Yeah.
focus. Oh, sorry, just so we're coming to the end. We've got a very bit, a short amount of time, but I'd love to just to finish up just by um, what would be some key things that you think are really important for people to be thinking about, especially in your role as an AI ethicist, that are
Yeah.
maybe not well understood, not people aren't thinking about that you think could be really important for people to consider right now. So,
Yeah. I think a couple of things that are totally within your power right now are A, as we've been talking about values a lot today, taking the time to really deeply understand and articulate your values to yourself. And this can be done through different exercises. There's a lot of different frameworks out there. You can literally just type in Google or ChatGPT or Claude, my personal recommendation for an LLM, um, a values exercise to help me understand and articulate my values, especially around AI and technology. And then write those down and put them up and make sure you're living by those. So, for example, one of my values is trying to live in my ikigai, which is a Japanese philosophy around living in your purpose. And being really clear on like what my ikigai is helps me to ensure that I'm only using AI for the things that will help me to be more fully in that purpose. So, for example, I'm a writer, I'm a communicator, I'm a speaker. I don't have any interest in learning how to code, but could I one day see AI helping me to code an app for Remaining Human, my community? Absolutely. And I don't think that would like make me atrophy or lose my skills or be less empowered. So being really clear with yourself on what can I use AI on to truly augment my capabilities and not replace. my innate creativity and my decision-making power and my critical thinking skills because we need to like stay sharp as humans, right? Um, and then just again, like you and I were just saying, but just bringing awareness to the tools you're using, doing research on the sustainability of the different tools you're using. There's more and more comparisons out there of the different tools, and you can again bring it back to values, understand by understanding what you value, looking at how different companies approach safety. Anthropic, for example, has a very robust like safety strategy. They have different mechanisms in place, like their constitution. They try to practice democratic participation in the development of AI, trying to integrate more voices into their platform. So none of these companies are perfect, but just by doing your research and understanding um, where their priorities lie and how those priorities align with your own values as a person. And I'm not advocating for one over the other. It's more about just for you as an individual, really knowing and understanding what kind of efforts and businesses you want to support, and then choosing based on that or not choosing to use AI based on that.
No, thanks for that. And yeah, wow, that's a really, really good note to finish on. So, Cecilia, it's been really, really great to have you on. I think it's so important that as we have, and I'm simplifying a bit, these two groups, there's a group of humans that are terrified and not even sure they want to know about this technology, and there's another group of
Yeah.
humans kind of rushing ahead. And what I kind of feel personally would be helpful for all of these humans is that we just maybe just think about what we're doing, whether we're ignoring it or just rushing ahead with it, that we just
Yeah.
reflect a bit more. And thank you so much, Cecilia, for what you've shared today. I think that would be really thought-provoking for all people, whatever their backgrounds and belief about
Yeah.
this technology. And if anyone has any feedback or comments, do feel free to comment on these podcast show notes. I'm sure Cecilia will be interested to hear as well. And
Yes, please.
it's been great to have
Yeah.
you on today, and I'm sure we'll do another one. There's so much more we could, I think, discuss on this, and yeah, I
So
look forward to
much.
maybe working with you in the future on this. And to our listeners, I will see you all next time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this. This has been great. So nice to have this time with you and to share. And yes, we have so much more to talk about. So hopefully we'll be on another one of these soon. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye.